A few years ago, I bought my first house in a quiet town. It was an older two-story colonial, nothing fancy, but the price was right and it came with a decent-sized yard. After renting apartments for years, finally having my own place was amazing. The previous owner, our retired Professor Alan Foster, had lived there for decades before moving south to be closer to family. The house was charming, if a bit worn, dark wooden floors, squeaky stairs, and a big master bedroom upstairs. Over the next couple months, I did a lot of fixing up, painting walls, and replacing fixtures slowly, making the house feel like home. By mid-August, I'd accumulated enough random things in a longer needed old furniture. This has some tools to justify holding a yard sale. It felt like a good way to clear out clutter and maybe meet some neighbors. The morning of the sale was bright and sunny, already hot by 9. I'd arranged tables along the driveway, stacked boxes full of random things, and placed a few larger items like chairs and lamps by the sidewalk. Business was steady. Neighbors stopped by chatting casually, and I made a few sales here and there. Around 11, I noticed an older woman slowly walking toward me from down the street. She wore a faded floral dress and had gray hair neatly pinned back. She stood out simply because I'd never seen her around before, and I was small enough to notice a stranger. She didn't look at the tables or boxes. Instead, she came straight at me, pausing to study the house behind me with a thoughtful gaze. "You live here now?" Shast. Her voice is off-tan, raspy. "Yeah," I replied, feeling oddly unsettled by her stare. "Moved in a few months ago." She nodded slowly, still staring at the house. "I used to babysit the kids. Lived here a long time ago." She turned her eyes back to me, clear but distant. "You should really check under the floorboards in the master bedroom. Note everything was found." Before I could even ask what she meant, she turned around and began walking away as if she'd said all she needed to say. I called after her, but she didn't even glance back. Within moments, she was gone, leaving me standing in the hot sun, confused and uneasy. The rest of the sale passed quietly, but her words stuck with me. That evening, after everyone had gone and I'd cleaned up, I couldn't shake what she'd said. Note everything was found. What did that even mean? Curiosity eventually got the better of me. Upstairs in the master bedroom, I started tapping my feet across the hardwood floor, listening for anything unusual. After the closet, the floorboards there sounded hollow compared to the rest of the room. I hesitated, then knelt down and gently pressed against the boards. Sure enough, one of them lifted slightly, loose enough to pry open by hand. My pulse quickened. As I pulled up, the board beneath it, covered in a thin layer of dust and insulation fibers, was a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth. My heart pounded harder. I hesitated before finally reaching in and carefully pulling it out. It was heavier than I expected. The cloth felt brittle and old. Nervously, I unfolded a corner, only to see what looked unmistakably like small bones stuck inside. They weren't large, but clearly not something you'd find by accident. Someone had intentionally hidden these. I quickly put the bundle down, my heart racing. Now, who hides bones beneath floorboards? My mind raced through possibilities, each darker than the last. Without hesitating further, I grabbed my phone and called the DOE police. They arrived within half an hour. 2 officers carefully took photographs, bagged the bundle, and searched further beneath the boards, finding nothing else. They asked questions when I moved in, if I'd ever met the previous owner personally, but I had few answers. Days passed before the police finally called with an update. They assured me the bones weren't human. Tests confirmed they belonged to an animal, likely a small dog or cat. The bones were old, at least 30 years, maybe longer. Strange eyes, but apparently not criminal. There wasn't much else they could do. It thanked the man had tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. I called the previous owner, Alan Foster, just to ask if he knew anything. He seemed genuinely confused, saying he had no idea about bones or the floorboards, and sounded unsettled himself. He ended our call quickly. It left me even more disturbed. I checked town records looking for clues. The house had changed hands several times over the years, owners moving in and out frequently until Foster had settled their but nothing suspicious, nothing unusual. Beyond normal sales and moves, I kept waiting for the old woman to return, hoping she'd explain, but she never did. None of my neighbors recognized her description. She was a complete mystery, just another loose end. Nearly a year later, those bones still bother me. Why hide animal bones beneath floorboards? Did the woman know about them, and why did she bother telling me? But more troubling than any of those questions were her words, the ones I couldn't shake. No matter how hard it tried, note everything was found. If those bones weren't what she meant, then what else could be hidden here beneath my feet in the shadows of this old house? Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. Your support means the world to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. Back in August of 2018, I decided it needed a good camera. My iPhone was fine, but photography was becoming aerial hobby. I wanted something better, professional looking to mess around with on weekends and maybe even shoot family portraits with. I lived in a quiet little suburb of Portland, Oregon, Beaverton, nice houses, tree-lined streets, a safe place. Yard sales popped up every weekend, especially late summer. So on a sunny Saturday morning, I got up early and started browsing the neighborhood. It was around 10 when I found one particular house on Cedar Hills Boulevard. Nothing special, white paint, red shutters, an older ranch-style home. But the yard was cluttered with boxes, stables covered with clothes, tools, and random things behind a pile of old books. I spotted a dusty black DSLR camera, a Nikon decent model, just older. The woman running the sale was probably late 40s, starred-looking, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. When I asked about the camera, she gave me a weird look. It belonged to my ex-husband. She mumbled, eyes down at her coffee cup. Just take it, $20 is fine. I want it gone. $20 for a Nikon DSLR, easy choice. I handed her the cash, said thanks, and drove home feeling pretty good. About my luck, the camera was dusty, but otherwise looked perfect at home. I cleaned it off, charged the battery, and the memory card inside was still loaded with photos, hundreds of them. My curiosity kicked in immediately. I started scrolling through the images, sitting on my sofa with the late morning sun shining through the windows. Most of the pictures seemed pretty normal vacations at the coast, a cute dog playing fetch, family barbecue. Then slowly the photos got darker. At first I thought the camera settings were wrong, or maybe the photographer was testing shots, but something felt off. The were pictures of someone's backyard at night, grainy, shadow-filled images taken through branches and fences. Next were zoomed-in shots of a porch with patio furniture arranged neatly. It felt too easy. These weren't normal photos. These looked secretive, like surveillance. I kept clicking through. My heart started beating a little quicker. The next pictures had a bedroom, window curtains drawn inside. The next one, the same room, but closer. The next, a woman asleep in bed, blanket. Her completely unaware she was being photographed. It felt sick. This wasn't Kay. My hands trembled as I kept scrolling through. It was definitely someone spying on this woman night after night. Then something made my chest tighten in panic. The bedroom, and these pictures looked exactly like Merton's, same arrangement of furniture. Even the book on the nightstand looked familiar. My stomach knotted up so tightly I almost threw up. I jumped up and rushed to my bedroom, my head spinning, trying to convince myself it couldn't be my room. But the curtains were exactly like Mina, the cheap beige ones I bought from Target last spring. Same bedspread pattern, same lamp. My bedroom was unmistakable. I stared out the windows, suddenly very aware of how easy it was to see into my home at night if the curtains weren't pulled tight. Who had taken these photos? And when I threw the camera into a plastic grocery bag, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the police station on Griffith. My hands shook as I explained everything to a detective named Brian Carson. He took the camera and assured me they'd look into it. 2 days later, Detective Carson called. The voice was calm but serious. The camera belonged to a man named Stephen Grant. He lived in your neighborhood until 2 years ago, arrested in late 2016 for stalking a woman who lived nearby, but charges were dropped due to lack of hard evidence. Grant appeared shortly after that. Nobody's seen him since. I asked if they found anything else out. Carson paused. We talked to the woman who sold you the camera. Turns out she wasn't exactly truthful. Stephen Grant wasn't their ex-husband. They were never married. She was just his landlord. He vanished without paying rent, leaving his stuff behind. She sold it off piece by piece. Just wanted to be right of him. But the photos, my bedroom, is stammered, feeling dizzy. The timestamp on those photos, Carson interrupted quietly, was the last night. Saying 2 years ago, I went cold. Grant had been at my window watching me sleep 2 years ago, and nobody had known. I changed my locks that afternoon. I bought thicker curtains, got a security camera, and tried not to think about it. But every time night fell and I closed those curtains tight, I wondered, Stephen Grant vanished, but he's still out there somewhere, maybe far away, maybe just down the street, maybe even standing quietly in the shadow, again camera in hand. After all, I never heard of him being found. Last July, my wife Melissa and I decided to hold a yard sale at her home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Melissa's grandfather had recently passed away, leaving us with an attic full of antiques and old furniture. The plan was simple: sell what we could donate the rest and reclaim our living space. The morning of the sale began quietly. Neighbors drifted in and out, browsing tables filled with vintage lamps, sold records, and dusty picture frames. Seifu antique collectors stopped by, asking questions and negotiating prices. Everything was ordinary, at least until about noon. An older man, probably in his mid-60s, approached our table silently. He wore a worn denim jacket, had thinning gray hair, and carried himself stiffly. Unlike most customers who casually chatted, this man said nothing. His eyes quickly scanned our offerings. landing sharply on a pair of antique binoculars. They had belonged to Melissa's grandfather, probably from the 1940s, leather-bound and remarkably well-preserved. Without a word, he picked them up, turned the mover carefully, inspecting every detail. His hands trembled slightly. It right engaging him, offering a bit of history, but he remained silent. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out cash, handed Myth the exact asking price, and walked away briskly. We watched him leave, slightly unsettled, but shrugged. Face eccentric behavior. Yard sales attracted all kinds. After all, we forgot about him until the following weekend. A Sunday evening around twilight, Melissa was washing dishes while I prepared dinner. Glancing out the kitchen window, I noticed movement in our backyard near the fence line. At first, I assumed it was an animal, but when I focused, I saw clearly it was a man standing quietly among the shadows of our garden, looking directly at our house through binoculars. My heart jumped. It took only seconds to realize it was the same man who had bought Melissa's grandfather's binoculars. Without thinking, I rushed to the backyard, shouting loudly. Melissa closed behind me, but as soon as Theman heard us, she bolted toward the back fences, swiftly disappearing into the dusk. Wes stood silently, hearts pounding, staring into the empty darkness. We debated calling the police, but ultimately convinced ourselves it was just a bizarre incident. Perhaps she lived nearby and was simply strange or confused. Days passed quietly again, but the uneasiness remained, a quiet anxiety whenever fully It lingered in a routine, subtly altering the sense of safety we'd always taken for granted. The following Thursday, I was working a late shift at the office. My phone had been set a silent mode, buried under paperwork on my desk. Around 10:30, preparing to head home, I glanced at my phone and froze in disbelief. There were 20 missed calls, all from Melissa. I immediately dialed her back. The phone rang repeatedly, but she didn't answer. Panic rising, I grabbed my keys and sped home, pushing speed limits and ignoring stop signs. As I pulled onto our street, my heart sank further. 2 police cars were parked in our driveway, lights flashing silently in the night. The front window was shattered, glass scattered across the porch and front lawn. My mind raced, imagining the worst, but relief flooded through me when I saw Melissa standing inside, visibly shaking, speaking quietly with 2 officers. She told me what had happened, voice quivering. Around 9:30, she'd felt uneasy, as if was outside. She saw Mingate, the same older man, standing quietly at the back fence, binoculars aimed toward the house. Terrified, she ran to lock the doors, but within moments she heard glass breaking. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the counter and dialing the police. As she barricaded herself inside, by the time officers arrived, the man was gone. They searched the area but found nothing. Melissa described the man clearly, but without more evidence, the police had little to pursue. The next morning, we installed a security system, reinforced our windows, and promised ourselves we'd be more vigilant. Yet despite all precautions, our sense of security was damaged. Exactly 1 week later, returning from work, Melissa called me frantically. She discovered a ladder leaning against the side of our house, placed carefully beneath the second-story bedroom window. Nothing appeared disturbed inside, but the implication was clear. Someone had attempted to gain entry. Again, we didn't wait around to see if he'd return. Within a month, we'd moved across town into a smaller, newer place with better security. Our old home sold quickly, and we did our best to leave behind what had happened, hoping distance might ease our lingering fear. It didn't. Months later, while unpacking boxes, Melissa came across an old photograph of her grandfather holding those very binoculars. She turned it over in her hands, lost in thought, and asked softly, almost to herself, why those binoculars? Only then did a chilling thought cross my mind, clearly. For the first time, what if the man hadn't been interested in the binoculars themselves, but rather the view they provided? Maybe he'd bought them specifically because they'd belonged to her grandfather, knowing exactly who we were. Perhaps she'd been watching us far longer than we realized, hidden quietly in the background, waiting patiently for an opportunity. We could never fully understand. The worst part is we'll probably never know the truth.